We use cyborg to digitize three-dimensional objects and get the representation into the computer. And one of the most powerful ways, or one of the most exciting ways to use it, is to get people's facial expressions into the computer. So we have a person sit in a chair, and the cyborg has a laser beam that rotates around the actor or actress, and by scanning in single lines, sort of like slicing an orange or something, we can reconstruct the actor's face. And you're very free to direct an actor any way you want. They can have expressions of sadness, happiness, fear. It's a very free process. You can sort of go with what's happening and digitize those expressions as you wish. And we can immediately work with them, animate, model, create human, very realistic, very strong human faces and heads.
You know, it was quite something to go through. You know, going up there and starting to share with them what I was thinking and how I thought he should run and walk and how I wanted to carry him and how he would move. And then them filming it and actually putting the grids on me and spinning me around, and they painted that on me.
Well, the interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize about Terminator 2 is that the T-1000 was created by a mix of techniques. You know, from Stan Winston Studios, they created puppets and flexible metal figures that filled in a lot of the gaps in the computer graphics shots. The computer graphics shots are very expensive, so that was not a panacea technique to create this character. In the film, there's probably 42 computer graphics shots and 120 Stan Winston shots, but people just sort of thought, oh, it's a computer graphics character. So Stan's guys and Stan were kind of the unsung heroes of the film, because a lot of the credit went to the computer graphics team, but the character was created by a mix of techniques, which I really think is the right way to use all these tools, the right way to use computer graphics, at least in a photorealistic context, which is that you have to create a seamless blend of techniques. I mean, it's not high-tech versus low-tech, it's a continuum, it's a spectrum where, you know, I will use any available trick. And if one available trick is some tape and baling wire and whatever, some old trick that's been around for 50 years, I'll use that. And if the shot requires Silicon Graphics, you know, Onyx to process a bazillion bits of data and come up with an image that couldn't be created any other way, we'll use that. They're all just tools. The important thing is the image. You come up with the image.
To get the effect of the frozen mercury in the film, to get it to melt, as if it were actually melting mercury. The thought was that maybe we should just try freezing mercury and warming it to room temperature, and then it would flow the way it normally would. Practically possible, but not very practical to do this. The idea that we had thought of is to do a substitution for mercury, to use something possibly like solder that might melt in a similar way to mercury and look the same once it was melted. But it turned out solder doesn't quite work that well. It doesn't quite have enough sheen to it. So we had heard of a metal called cerabin. Cerabin is a very, very soft, very low melting temperature metal. It's almost like butter in a sense, not quite that extreme. And so what we did is we took some of the shards, some of the actual pieces that were used on the production, and made little molds of them out of clay, and melted the cerabin. We actually used a torch and melted it and then poured it into these little molds. They cooled off fairly quickly, and then we bent back the clay and popped them out of the molds quite quickly. The clay was able to take the heat, and there wasn't any problem with the clay. We could make molds like crazy really quickly. And we wound up with little shards that were in scale for our purposes. They were about right. They were very tiny, and we photographed them with a macro lens. And we put it on a hot plate, essentially. We took a camping stove and put it underneath a metal plate and caused the heat to continuously rise under it to the point where it would melt it. And it would reach a point and it would start oozing a little bit like butter does in a frying pan. But in this case, it tended to go quite quickly and melted and flattened out. But it did seem to work right. We had to overcrank, shoot at the right frame rate. We wound up actually undercranking to get it's combinations of speeds again that work. A larger piece would melt at a different rate, we'd shoot at a different rate. A smaller piece would be at a different rate. And then we would take the best of. We had to shoot quite a few because, again, if the plate wasn't totally level, this would run off screen in the wrong direction. We'd have to bend the...
The T-1000 transformation sounds were the most bizarre sounds we had to come up with. Everything else had a real-life corollary. So I came up with a lot of bizarre ideas. Originally, I had these ideas that since he's metal, it would be these shrieking, singing, vocalish kind of metal movement. And I recorded a lot of stuff where you could take a string bow from a violin and you rub it against cymbals or pieces of metal. you get these very interesting sounds. And some of that is still in there when he's transforming into crowbars and spikes. But when I was first working on it, I had a whole variety of sounds possible. And we did a tie line screening from San Francisco to LA. And Jim sat down in a theater in LA, and via the tie line he was able to see a scene. We chose the scene where he comes off the tile in the front of the coffee machine, and I played my amazingly brilliant sound design string bow on various pieces of metal, and he said no. And we worked our way down to, I think it was a sound of putting your hand in cheese casserole, and that's what he liked. So I had a direction that he wanted. He didn't want high-tech, weird stuff. He just wanted goop. So that's when we started then recording interesting versions of goop. That's when we recorded dog food coming out of a can upside down as slowly as we could possibly get with that suction sound. We recorded blowing compressed air into a flour and water mixture and making these big bubbles, and we recorded it from inside the mixture by putting a condom on a microphone, putting it in the flour, and getting an interesting perspective, and it had this evolving metallic airy sound that you hear in the movie as the T-1000 is coming off the tile floor or lifting off the steel mill floor when he forms back into his body. We recorded a lot of stuff with a big vat of yogurt and a cup and just pounding the cup into the yogurt, and that became a lot of the bullet hits on the T-1000. So we went from my high-tech idea to...
Oh yeah, the walk out of the fire. Well, that was actually very funny because that was the first big involvement with the computer graphic effects. And I remember because it's kind of funny because Jim had already warned me about, my hair trigger and kind of, you gotta, I was so gung-ho that I would kind of go in too far or try to do, and he had said, listen, I want you to run in there as far as you can, but as soon as it starts to get hot, you stop, turn around, find a mark, and then begin the walkout. And don't run in there too far, but get as close as you can. So I listened to him, but it went like in one ear and out the other, and I went, no, I've got to really do this for Jim and me and blah, 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 and for the movie. And it was the first big effects thing. And I ran in there, and I got in there so far, and I turned, and I stood there, and I hit the mark, and I got settled, and I got all in the T-1000 stance and everything. And the next thing I know, I could smell my shirt was burning, it was like an iron. It smelled like an iron on a shirt, and my ears were stinging, and I still haven't heard action. And I'm, now the backs of my hands are really starting to sting, and I'm thinking, oh my God, at any moment I'm just going to ignite. He's gone. And so I think that was the first take where he said action. And man, as soon as he said action, I was like, phew, I was out of there. I was walking, and I started walking even faster, and I'm walking even faster, and I finally just blew the whole take. And I remember Jim going, well, I told you don't have to go in there that far, and I was like, I know. Oh, sorry about that. What we finally decided to do, they put all that heat retardant and stuff on the back of my ears because they do sort of attract things. And I ran in there with Pasha, my stand-in, and he held like one of those furniture blanket or something, but it was something that would kind of protect us from the heat. We'd stand there and wait until they got close and they were all set up to go, and we'd be on the mark, and I'd get all ready and into the stance and everything, and then Pasha would take the blanket and run out real quick, and then it was go, and then it was find the pace to match the computer. That was a bitch of a shot. I think that took us like all day, and I'm sure that was a very expensive shot because, every take they had to reignite the fire and get that just right, and that was tough. It was a little freaky, because then I thought, God,